It began on a calm evening across the colonies of humanity, the kind of evening that made people believe peace would last forever. On the lush green plains of Eden Prime, children played under a pale blue sun, their laughter echoing across cities built of steel and glass. On Mars, students finished their lessons and waved at the distant Earth glowing faintly in the night sky. Across every human world, the hum of civilization felt warm and alive. Trade ships moved between systems, colonies thrived, and the Galactic Council, a gathering of hundreds of alien species, spoke of unity and progress. Humanity had fought long and hard to earn its place among the stars. For once, it seemed as though peace had truly been achieved. But peace, as Admiral Rowan Hale would later say, is only silence before the storm. It started with a flicker, a faint distortion in the communications grid between Earth and the outer colonies. Engineers dismissed it as a solar flare, but within minutes, entire networks began to collapse. The first missing signal came from Vega Station, then the colony on Demos Ridge, then the Luna Academies orbiting the twin moons of a council world. Parents tried to send messages to their children, but every channel returned the same haunting silence. Earth's global network flooded with confusion and panic. Thousands of families gathered at communication centers, watching blank screens that once displayed the faces of their sons and daughters. The panic grew when rescue teams sent to investigate also went silent. In less than 24 hours, over 60 colonies across human space had gone dark. No explosions, no distress calls, no debris, just absence, like someone had erased entire worlds from existence. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, claiming there had been a containment accident near a council-operated research planet called Terran 9. They said an experimental energy reactor had malfunctioned, spreading a wave of radiation that rendered communication impossible. To the common citizen, it sounded like a tragedy. But to the Terran Fleet Command, the story didn't fit. A radiation wave couldn't selectively target human colonies while leaving alien ones untouched. Admiral Rowan Hale, a man with sharp eyes and a calm, commanding presence, watched the broadcast in silence. He had seen too many wars to mistake an accident for an act of aggression. "Someone took them," he murmured to his aide. His voice was cold, measured, not of a man surprised, but of one betrayed. When he spoke those words before the Fleet Council that night, the chamber fell quiet. Hale wasn't the kind of man who speculated. He spoke when he was sure. The Terran fleet launched search operations in all directions. Recon drones entered abandoned systems, scanning for signs of life. What they found was worse than anyone imagined. On one planet after another, entire cities stood untouched, power still running, food still fresh, doors unlocked. But not a single human being remained. No bodies, no signs of struggle. It was as if someone had taken every child, every student, every young soul in a single instant. The few alien worlds near human colonies denied involvement, but Terran intelligence intercepted encrypted council communications that told another story. Keywords like transfer authorization and genetic intake appeared again and again. Something was being hidden, something that went far beyond an accident. Hale personally oversaw the decoding of the messages. What he read made him grip the table so tightly that the steel bent under his hand. The words were clear: subject transport complete. Human juvenile specimens secured. Proceed to Phase 2. The Council had not only lied, they had sanctioned the abduction of humanity's children. Across Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Riots broke out in major cities. People demanded war. Mothers wept in the streets. Fathers enlisted by the thousands. For years, humans had tolerated the Council's arrogance, believing peace required patience. But now patience had turned to fury. Hale stood before the cameras of the United Earth Broadcast Network, his uniform dark and crisp, his eyes tired yet unbroken. "They took our children," he said quietly, "and for that there will be no peace." The next day, Earth withdrew from the Galactic Council, closed all its embassies, and recalled every human citizen from alien space. Humanity vanished behind a wall of silence. The Council mocked the decision at first. They believed humanity would beg for trade, for technology, for relevance. They were wrong. On the far side of the solar system, shipyards on Titan, Mars, and Neptune went dark, sealed off from all outside contact. Satellites detected strange energy readings near Jupiter's orbit, where a massive structure was under construction. The aliens called it panic engineering, a desperate attempt at revenge. But they didn't know what humanity was building. They didn't know that in the cold shadows beyond Neptune, the Aegis Array was being born. A weapon not of destruction, but of silence, capable of bending light and energy to erase a star from existence. Hale called it the Hand of Judgment. Months passed. The galaxy moved on, pretending nothing had happened. The Council continued their experiments. Confident Earth had retreated into grief. Then came the first warning. In the Dominion sector, an alien patrol ship vanished near the star Argon 3. Days later, the Dominion's communication hub, a massive station orbiting their sun, transmitted one final message. A child's voice whispering, "Give them back." Then the system went dark. When a Dominion fleet arrived, their sun flickered. Within minutes, it collapsed into a black void, swallowing every orbiting world. Billions perished in silence. No explosion, no fire, just the extinguishing of light. Across the galaxy, chaos erupted. The Council demanded an investigation, but their sensors couldn't detect what caused the collapse. Only one signal had been captured in the aftermath. A human frequency, ancient and unmistakable, repeating a single phrase, "Return our children." One by one, every empire that had joined Project Dawn, the Council's hidden program to harvest human genetic material for experimentation, began to lose their sons. The galaxy finally realized humanity had not disappeared. They had prepared. Terran fleets, black as night, began appearing in orbit over Council worlds, silent and unmoving. They did not speak, did not fire, only observed. Then one by one, those worlds lost their light. Panic swept through alien capitals. Inside the Council chamber, chaos reigned. The leaders screamed at each other, trading accusations. "It was your scientists. It was your generals. You started Project Dawn." None could deny the truth. They had stolen humanity's children to create an enhanced species, hybrids of human adaptability and alien power, meant to serve as the next evolution of the galaxy. The humans were supposed to be weak, compliant, forgiving, but they had underestimated what happens when you take from a species that remembers pain. Hale received the intercepted Council message in his command ship, the Vigilant Dawn. He read their plea for negotiation and closed the transmission without a word. His fleet moved silently toward the Council's central system. Meanwhile, deep in the ruins of the Dominion Research Complex, a Terran strike team discovered something unimaginable, cryopods stretching for miles, each containing sleeping human children. Some pods were empty, others still active. The soldiers wept as they realized they had found them. But when the scientists checked the bioscans, they froze. The children were alive but changed. Their cells emitted light, their neural activity beyond anything human. They were awake before the lids opened, their eyes glowing like starlight. "Who are you?" whispered the medic. The first child smiled faintly. "We are what they made us," she said softly. "And we remember who you are." When Hale arrived, the children gathered around him, their voices calm and unified. They remembered nothing of their abduction, only flashes of pain and light, but they could feel everything. They knew who had taken them. They knew who had built the machines that changed them, and they wanted justice. "You gave us life," the eldest said. "Now let us finish it." Hale hesitated. They were still human, but something beyond it too, part machine, part energy, something the galaxy could no longer control. He looked at the stars above and gave the order, "Target the Council core. End it." As the Terran fleet advanced, alien worlds screamed for mercy. The Council sent messages of apology, swearing they would return everything if humanity stopped. But the decision was no longer Earth's alone. The children, humanity's new sons and daughters, reached out with minds that could touch the stars. They turned the Aegis Array toward the Council system. From orbit, the sun began to dim. Alien citizens watched in horror as daylight faded into eternal dusk. The council begged. They offered peace, reparations, surrender. The human ships did not reply. Then, in a moment that silenced every voice in the galaxy, the council's sun vanished. It did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. The once bright capital world drifted in darkness, frozen in minutes. Hale stood on the bridge of the vigilant dawn, watching the star's final light fade from his screen. Around him, his officers stood in silence. There was no victory speech, no celebration, just the heavy sound of breath. "Let this be the last lesson," Hale said finally. "Never touch Earth again." The message was transmitted across every known system. Some called humanity monsters, others called them gods, but none dared to challenge them again. In the aftermath, the surviving alien races scattered, hiding their remaining fleets, praying humanity's wrath was done. Earth withdrew once more, closing its borders. The Terran colonies rebuilt. The children, now glowing with strange light, became humanity's guardians, protectors of the void. They did not age. They did not sleep. They called themselves the Dawn Returned. Under their watch, no human child was ever taken again. And in the silent space where the council's sun once burned, a faint pulse of light still flickered, the memory of what humanity had lost, and the warning that echoed through the stars forever. When you steal from Earth, you steal from a species that will burn the heavens to take it back. Admiral Rowan Hale did not sleep for days after the disappearances began. His eyes fixed on the endless reports that told him nothing and everything at once. Empty words covering up a truth he could already feel deep in his bones, that the Galactic Council had done something unforgivable, and they thought humanity would bow its head and accept it like before. But Hale knew his people better than anyone. He had seen what humanity became when pushed beyond mercy, and he could already hear the thunder of engines being prepared in secret, the hum of ships being armed, the whispers of vengeance spreading through every colony. Across Earth, the silence grew heavy, like the pause before a storm. Governments held emergency meetings, scientists demanded answers, and the council kept sending their polished diplomats with their smooth lies, their hollow sympathy, claiming the incident was an unfortunate cosmic event. Nothing more. No one's fault, just an accident of the universe. But behind those smiles, Hale saw fear. They knew what they had done. He replayed the recovered fragment again and again. The words burned into his mind. Subject transfer complete. Human juvenile specimens secured. Proceed to Phase 2. His hands tightened on the console as he watched the timestamp flash. The file was weeks old, meaning they had been planning this long before the first signal vanished. It wasn't chaos. It was organized theft of life. Humanity's future, its very children, had been taken, traded, experimented upon, and the galaxy thought they could hide it behind bureaucracy and treaties. Hale stood in the command center of the Terran fleet headquarters as officers rushed across glowing decks, holomaps showing the spreading blackout zones. "How many colonies still offline?" he asked. 73 confirmed, Admiral," one officer replied, his voice trembling. "No communications, no life readings, no survivors." Hale's jaw tightened. He didn't curse, didn't rage. He simply turned toward the central screen, where the image of the Galactic Council's emblem hovered. "Open a line," he said. The aide hesitated. "Sir," the council requested. "I don't care what they requested," Hale snapped. "Open the line." Seconds later, the holographic faces of the council appeared. Dozens of alien delegates glowing in shades of blue, green, and gold. The High Chancellor, a creature of long limbs and hollow eyes, spoke first, his tone dripping with false calm. "Admiral Hale, humanity's distress is unfortunate, but I assure you, the containment accident was—" Hale cut him off. "You can stop lying now. We intercepted your data logs." The chamber of alien voices fell silent. Hale leaned forward. "Return them, every last one, or you'll wish the stars themselves had gone dark before we did." For a moment, the Chancellor tried to smile. "Admiral, surely you wouldn't." Hale ended the transmission. No threats, no debate, just silence. Within hours, Every Terran embassy across the galaxy shut its doors. Every human fleet withdrew from Council space. Civilian transports were recalled, and the trade lanes that once shimmered with commerce went dark. The aliens called it hysteria. They called humans emotional, unstable, childish. But they didn't see what Hale saw: the factories on Mars running without pause, the massive shipyards on Titan sealing themselves off, the engineers whispering of something vast being built under the command of Terran intelligence. Hale moved between departments, overseeing designs that even he barely understood. "Can it work?" he asked the lead scientist. The woman looked up from her console, exhaustion in her eyes. "It's not about if, sir," she said softly. "It's about how far you're willing to go." Hale said nothing. He was already too far gone to turn back. The project had no name in official records, but among the engineers it was called Aegis Array, a device capable of bending energy across stellar distances, capable of silencing entire systems. It was not a weapon meant to conquer. It was meant to erase. As months passed, alien merchants reported that humanity had vanished behind their borders. No messages, no negotiations, no trade. It was as if Earth had gone silent forever. But in that silence, something terrifying was being forged. On the cold moon of Titan, thousands of soldiers trained beneath banners that bore no insignia. Only the phrase, "We remember." Hale visited them often, walking among the ranks of silent men and women who had lost sons, daughters, and futures. He did not give speeches. He simply looked each soldier in the eye and nodded. That was enough. Every one of them knew why they were there. In the outer reaches, the fleet expanded beyond imagination. Massive ships of matte black hulls were launched from dry docks the size of continents. They bore no identification, no transponders, only silence. Even the stars seemed to dim around them, as though light itself hesitated to touch the weapons humanity had built. One night, as Hale stood in his private quarters overlooking the red curve of Mars, a message arrived from Earth's Prime Minister. "Rowan," the voice said through static, "if we strike first, we'll lose everything we built." Hale watched the stars outside his window, remembering the empty playgrounds, the hollow cities, the recordings of mothers screaming into dead channels. "We already lost everything," he said quietly, and ended the call. At that same moment, deep within Jupiter's orbit, the first section of the Aegis Array activated. Space rippled like water, a faint pulse of gravity spreading through the void. Somewhere across the galaxy, Dominion scouts noticed a flicker on their sensors, a brief blackout in their star's radiation signature. They dismissed it as interference. They didn't realize it was a warning. Humanity was testing its creation. By dawn, every fleet under Terran command was on high alert. Hale walked the deck of his flagship, the Vigilant Dawn, as it prepared to leave orbit. He could feel the tension in the air, the way the crew looked at him with a mix of reverence and fear. "Sir," said his first officer, a young woman named Arya Lorne, "do you really think they'll return the children?" Hale stopped beside her. "No," he said simply, "but they'll remember why they should have." Outside, the engines roared to life, their blue thrusters lighting up the Martian horizon. The Vigilant Dawn rose slowly, followed by hundreds of ships, a fleet so large it blotted out the stars. From Earth to Neptune, humanity watched the sky and whispered prayers. Some for vengeance, some for mercy, all for justice. The Council issued statements calling for restraint. Their news networks painted humanity as aggressors, unstable beings blinded by grief. But in quiet, private meetings, alien leaders trembled. They remembered the wars of centuries past, the times humanity had fought against extinction and won. They remembered what Earth had done when pushed. And as the last human transmissions faded into silence, a single encrypted message spread through the void, bouncing between every council relay. "Return our children, or lose your light." No one knew where it came from, but every alien officer who read it felt the same chill crawl down their spine. Because they all understood one thing about humanity. When they say they will come, they do. The galaxy waited, holding its breath as if afraid to move. The stars themselves seemed quieter in those weeks after Earth went dark. Trade lanes emptied, diplomats recalled, colonies silent. But in the shadows, deep within the black stretch beyond Neptune, humanity was working, not in anger, not in chaos, but in cold precision, every hand, every mind focused on one purpose, to bring their children home, and make the galaxy pay for what it had done. The Aegis array was no longer a secret whispered by engineers. It was now a living creation, a weapon so vast it stretched between moons, a ring of titanic structures linked by gravity fields, humming with energy that distorted time itself. It fed on the light of nearby stars and turned it into power beyond comprehension, and Hale stood at its heart, watching the blue-white arcs of plasma twist across the sky like veins of lightning. His reflection in the observation glass looked older, harder, but there was no hesitation in his eyes. He had made peace with what was coming. Because the Council had forced his hand, they had taken what could never be replaced, and in doing so, they had ended the age of peace forever. On Mars, the shipyards glowed red as steel titans were born, ships larger than cities taking shape in silence, their hulls black as the void, their names engraved in memory of the lost. Saren's Hope, Children of Earth, Vengeance Dawn, each one built not for conquest, but for retribution. Humanity no longer cared about territory or trade. They wanted truth. They wanted their blood returned, and the galaxy would feel their absence like a heartbeat gone missing. Hale moved among his officers. Their faces grim, their eyes burning with purpose. No one asked what the plan was anymore. They already knew. It wasn't about negotiation. It was about making sure no one ever dared to harm humanity again. Not now. Not in 1,000 years. The engineers called it deterrence. The soldiers called it justice, but Hale, standing before the fleet, simply called it balance. The day the first activation signal was sent, every human colony aligned its satellites toward a single point in space. Deep within the asteroid belt a beacon pulsed once, faint and brief, but it spread faster than light, a signal that reached every ship, every captain, every soldier ready to strike, and across the Terran command net, the voice of Admiral Rowan Hale filled the silence, calm and controlled, but carrying a weight that shook the hearts of all who heard it. "We are not the monsters they think we are," he said. "We are the guardians they forced into being, the keepers of our own children, and if they have chosen darkness, then we will show them what true night is." His words hung in the void, followed by absolute stillness, and then, one by one, the human ships disappeared into the deep black, their drives flaring for a moment before vanishing into the folds of space. The galaxy's borders began to blur. Strange readings appeared on alien sensors, anomalies near stars that shouldn't exist, energy distortions that made entire fleets disappear. The Council dismissed them as natural phenomena. But fear had already taken root. The same fear that once belonged to humans now belonged to them. Meanwhile, on the alien world of Eridus Prime, one of the Council's high command centers, a research scientist named Varen stumbled upon a sealed report marked Project Dawn. Phase 3. His hands shook as he opened the file. Lines of text filled the screen, describing genetic extractions, neural reprogramming, and cross-species graphs. The words juvenile human specimens repeated again and again. The goal was horrifying: immortality for the Council's elite, achieved by harvesting the regenerative traits of human DNA. They hadn't stolen humanity's children by accident. They had turned them into living experiments, energy vessels designed to preserve alien life. Varen tried to send the data to his superiors, but the message was intercepted. Security arrived minutes later, dragging him away as the terminal went dark. The next day, his entire department was dissolved, his name erased from records, but not before the information leaked into the underground networks of alien worlds, and for the first time, common citizens across the galaxy began to whisper the same question. What had the Council done to Earth's children? The whispers reached even the outer rim, where old veterans remembered the wars of old and the horrors humanity could unleash. One alien merchant captain, a reptilian veteran of the border wars, was overheard saying, "You can cage a lion, but if you touch its cubs, you've signed your own death sentence." And across 1,000 systems, that saying spread like wildfire. Still, the Council refused to believe humanity could challenge them. They saw the Terrans as stubborn, emotional creatures, driven by grief, not power. But that illusion shattered the day a son died. It happened in the Dominion sector, a system of 10 billion souls, a shining example of the Council's dominance. One moment the sun burned bright, the next it flickered, its light dimming as though something vast and invisible wrapped around it. Panic erupted, scientists scrambled to restore contact, but all sensors failed, ships vanished, power grids collapsed. Then came a voice, faint and soft, echoing across every transmission line, "Return our children." And then nothing. The sun went black, imploding into silence, leaving only darkness and the cold light of distant stars. Billions of lives erased in an instant, without a single shot fired. Across the galaxy, terror spread faster than the light that had vanished. The council called for an emergency summit, their leaders arguing, blaming each other. Some demanded retaliation, others begged for peace, but no one knew where to strike. No one knew where the humans were hiding, because there were no signals, no fleets in orbit, no declarations of war. Only the quiet thread of extinction hanging in the void. Admiral Hale watched it all unfold from the command deck of the Vigilant Dawn, his face illuminated by the blue glow of holographic screens displaying chaos reports from across alien space. He turned to his officers. "They'll call it vengeance," he said. "But this isn't vengeance. It's balance being restored." The officer beside him hesitated. "Sir, the array's next coordinates are ready. Shall we proceed?" Hale's eyes hardened. "Proceed," he said, his tone steady, emotionless, and somewhere far away, another star began to flicker. The aliens tried everything: diplomatic pleas, bribes, surrender offers. But humanity didn't respond. They didn't broadcast, didn't boast. They simply acted. The stars kept dying one by one, leaving behind frozen worlds and silent wrecks drifting through space. And the message was always the same, burned into the remains of every station. For the children. By now, the Council's fear had turned into despair, their empires shrinking, their citizens rebelling, chaos spreading faster than any weapon could contain. Yet in all that darkness, no one could find a single trace of Earth. It was as if humanity had become a ghost, a storm that came and went without warning. But Hale knew this was only the beginning, because somewhere in that silence, among the broken colonies and erased suns, he still had not found what he was truly looking for there. Children, the billions taken and never returned, and until he did, the galaxy would never see light again. The council chamber was chaos, every delegate shouting over the other, their shimmering robes and bright crests flashing beneath the cold light of the hall. But beneath all the noise there was only fear, raw and desperate, because for the first time in centuries, the mighty Galactic Council had no control, no answer, no defense. Their sons were dying and their fleets were powerless. No one could trace the cause, no one could predict where it would strike next, yet deep down they all knew. This was humanity's doing. The same species they had mocked as emotional, primitive, reckless, now wielded the power to erase entire systems without leaving a trace. The Chancellor slammed his clawed hand on the table, demanding silence. "We cannot continue like this," he hissed. "We must appeal to Earth." But his words were met with bitter laughter from the Dominion representative, a scaled creature whose empire had lost 3 of its sons in 1 week. "Appeal to whom?" he growled. "They no longer answer calls, they no longer exist as diplomats. They are executioners hiding in the dark." The room fell quiet, because no one dared to disagree. The truth was spreading beyond the chamber, through the lower worlds, through the colonies and trade ships. The people had begun to turn on their rulers. They had seen the intercepted documents. Project Dawn was no longer a secret. Everyone now knew that the Council had stolen human children, drained their minds, their blood, their DNA, in pursuit of eternal life, and the price was coming due. Across alien capitals, riots erupted, citizens screaming in the streets, banners of defiance waving as military police opened fire. The powerful empires that had ruled for millennia were cracking from the inside, and above them all, unseen, human fleets watched in silence, their ships hidden by the very light they could bend and erase. Hale watched the feeds from orbit, his face emotionless as worlds tore themselves apart. "They're destroying themselves," his first officer said quietly, but Hale shook his head. "No, they're only seeing what they've become." He turned away from the screens and looked toward the command deck where the array's control core pulsed faintly, blue lines of energy flowing through the steel walls. Alive, hungry, patient. "Prepare the strike," He ordered, "Target the Council's central sun." His officers hesitated. "Sir, that will cripple thousands of systems, billions of civilians." Hale didn't flinch. "Billions of our children are gone, Lieutenant, and those who took them are still breathing." The silence that followed was heavy, but no one argued again. They all knew there was no turning back. While the Council argued and pleaded, their secret installations began to fall one by one, outposts turning dark, science stations reduced to debris fields, human strike teams moved like shadows, wearing armor that blended with the void, their movements precise, coordinated, untraceable, no communications, no mercy. They retrieved fragments of data, broken logs, holograms of experiments gone wrong, human children screaming in sterile labs, alien doctors chanting about perfection and balance. It wasn't research, it was slaughter in the name of progress. And every time Hale saw those recordings, he felt the weight in his chest grow colder, heavier, less human. "They call us monsters," he whispered once to Arya, standing beside the viewport where the stars shimmered faintly. "But they built monsters long before we arrived." She didn't answer, just stared into the distance where a council fleet once stood. Now only drifting wrecks and silent echoes remained. In the great chamber of the council, the final vote was cast. An emergency resolution to surrender, but even as they transmitted their plea across the stars, the message went unanswered. The last human contact they had received had been weeks ago. A short line of text across their entire communication grid. "You don't get to decide when it ends." Panic set in as reports poured in of another sun dying. Then another, entire regions consumed by shadow, navigation routes collapsing as light itself was devoured. The Aegis array had awakened fully, its arcs stretching across space like the arms of some celestial god, bending the fabric of existence as easily as glass. It was no longer a weapon. It was judgment. The Chancellor of the Council stood alone in his office as the alarms blared. His planet's sun dimming outside the window. He had spent his entire life believing in the order of the universe, in hierarchy and control. And now he realized that the smallest of all races had destroyed everything he built. He fell to his knees, looking up at the fading light, whispering, "Please have mercy." But the void did not answer, because mercy was something humanity had buried with their children. Far away, aboard the Vigilant Dawn, Hale received the signal confirming the collapse. The room around him filled with dim blue light as his officers reported success. "The council system is gone," Arya said softly, her voice trembling. "Their sun, it's erased." Hale nodded slowly, his hands behind his back, eyes distant. "And what of the children?" he asked. "Still searching, sir," she replied. "But there's a chance." Hale turned away. "Then keep searching," he said, his tone quiet but sharp. "We didn't come for revenge, we came to bring them home." But deep inside he knew it was no longer about rescue. It was about making sure no one ever touched humanity again. The galaxy was now in ruins, fleets hiding in shattered systems, lightless worlds drifting without warmth. Every empire had lost someone. Something. Every ruler who once mocked Earth now begged for its forgiveness. But the stars remained silent. The humans didn't respond. They didn't negotiate. They didn't celebrate. They just watched as balance returned in the most terrible way, and somewhere, in that darkness, the faint echo of children's laughter could still be heard. Recordings stored in the databanks of ships that had seen too much, voices from a brighter age, reminding Hale why he had done what he did. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening, then whispered to no one, we warned them all." The Vigilant Dawn drifted past the husk of a dead sun, its engines quiet, its purpose complete, but the story of what happened, the story of how humanity erased the light of the guilty, would echo through the void for all eternity, a warning carved into the fabric of time. If you steal from Earth, you steal from the stars themselves. The ruins of the Galactic Council still floated in the void, their grand towers and silver domes now just debris spinning around a lifeless black sun. And yet, even as the light faded from that once proud system, humanity's work was far from finished, because Admiral Hale knew that the Council's destruction hadn't ended the nightmare. It had only torn away its mask, and now the real truth was beginning to crawl out from the shadows. Scattered reports from the outer colonies spoke of strange signals, faint human life signs coming from deep space laboratories long abandoned, whispers of children still alive. changed by experiments that had twisted their DNA into something no longer entirely human. And so the search began, fleets of black ships moving through the dark like silent hunters, scanning every derelict and forgotten world for signs of life. It wasn't conquest anymore. It was recovery, reclamation, redemption. Hale stood at the helm of the vigilant dawn, the stars reflecting in his eyes, his voice calm as he ordered. Activate the deep scan network. Find them, no matter where they hid them. His crew obeyed without hesitation, because after all the death and silence, this was the first time they had heard him speak of hope. But elsewhere, across the remnants of alien civilization, fear had turned to chaos. The species that once served the Council now turned against one another, scavenging for power, for survival, for forgiveness. Whole planets burned as warlords rose from the ashes of the fallen empires, and every one of them lived in terror of the humans returning. The name Terran became a curse, a prayer, a warning whispered to children to keep them quiet at night. But even then, none of them truly understood what humanity had become, because the humans weren't rebuilding cities or colonies. They were rebuilding silence, a wall around their world so vast that no ship dared to cross, and behind that wall, the Aegis array remained active, orbiting between the dead suns it had created, waiting, watching, a reminder that the wrath of Earth never truly sleeps. The search lasted months, then years, and with each discovery the truth became darker. Terran strike teams found laboratories filled with empty pods, shattered glass, and recorded screams that made even hardened soldiers tremble. Holograms showed alien scientists experimenting on human children, forcing their minds to expand beyond natural limits, injecting them with hybrid DNA, creating something they called the Ascendant Project. They hadn't wanted to just use human genes. They wanted to create new beings that could survive anywhere, beings that could control energy and matter itself, beings that would never die. Hale watched these recordings in silence, the flickering images reflecting on his weathered face, and each time he swore he would find the ones who survived, not to weaponize them, but to bring them home, to give them the childhood stolen from them by the monsters who called themselves civilized. And then, one day, a faint signal appeared near the edge of the Perseus Rift, a voice repeating the same word over and over, soft, childlike, and unmistakably human. Help! The entire fleet shifted course instantly, engines roaring to life, hundreds of ships bending space as they tore through the void toward the coordinates. When they arrived, they found a station hidden inside a broken asteroid field, its walls covered in strange energy fields, its corridors filled with silence, and deep within its core, cryopods lined the walls like coffins made of glass, thousands of them, glowing faintly blue, and inside each pod, a child. Some were human, others were something more. Their veins glowed faintly, their eyes moving beneath closed lids, and when the scientists scanned them, the readings went off the charts, neural activity 10 times that of any normal human, cells emitting radiation unknown to physics. It was as if these children had become stars in human form. Hale stood before them, his chest tight, his breath caught between awe and horror, and when the first pod opened, the air filled with light so pure it silenced every sound in the room. A young girl stepped out, her hair like threads of silver, her eyes bright with the light of a sun, and she looked directly at him, as if she had known him all her life. "You came?" she said softly, her voice calm, almost serene. "We knew you would." Hale knelt beside her, his hands trembling. "What did they do to you?" he asked, his voice breaking, and the child looked around at the others slowly awakening, the light from their bodies illuminating the room like dawn breaking after endless night. "They tried to change us," she said. "But they forgot what we are. We are human, and we remember." The word struck Hale deeper than any weapon ever could, because in that moment, he saw what humanity had become. Something beyond the flesh, beyond fear, beyond death itself. The aliens had tried to turn their children into tools of their empire, but they had only created something greater, something that would now decide the fate of the galaxy. News of the discovery spread quickly through the Terran fleet, and for the first time in years, soldiers cheered, scientists wept, and parents who had lost hope looked up at the night sky believing again. But Hale knew the war wasn't over, because the children, now awake and aware, carried memories not of love or laughter, but of pain. The machines had made them see everything, feel everything, the torment of generations encoded in their minds. And though they spoke gently, there was something. unshakable in their eyes, something eternal. "They are not gods," one scientist whispered. "They are the reflection of what we could become." But Hale knew better. They were justice made flesh. In the following days, as more pods were opened and the children reunited under the protection of the Terran fleet, the galaxy began to tremble again, because wherever these children went, stars flickered, energy fields warped, and gravity itself seemed to obey them. They were more than human, more than experiment. They were living embodiments of vengeance and creation combined, and they remembered what had been done to them. The Council's crimes were carved into their very DNA, and while Hale wanted peace, while he wanted to rebuild, he could see in their glowing eyes that peace was something the galaxy would never have again until the last of the guilty had paid. One night, standing in the observation deck, Hale watched as one of the children stood before the great window, looking at the stars. "Do you hate them?" he asked quietly, and she shook her head slowly. "No, Admiral," she said, her voice calm like the whisper of wind. "Hate is for those who fear. We are beyond fear now, but we will not let them forget, not ever." Hale looked at her, at the light shining from her hands, at the small reflection of a dying sun fading behind her, and he realized the truth. Humanity had not only avenged its children, it had created something the universe could never again destroy, a legacy of light born from the darkest of acts. And when he finally turned away, his reflection in the glass looked smaller, older, but his voice was firm. "Then let's bring them home," he said. "Every last one." The vigilant dawn turned slowly toward Earth, and behind it, a fleet of 1,000 ships followed, carrying the new dawn of humankind. The children of the stars returning to the world that birthed them, and the galaxy, watching from afar, could only whisper one truth, that the humans had not erased the light, they had become it. The return journey to Earth was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Thousands of black Terran ships gliding through the void in perfect formation, silent, deliberate, unstoppable, carrying within them the children who had once been stolen, now radiant beings whose presence alone seemed to bend reality. And at the heart of that procession, aboard the vigilant dawn, Admiral Rowan. Hale stood watching the blue sphere of Earth grow larger in the viewport. It had been years since he last saw it with his own eyes, the cradle of humanity now wrapped in orbital defenses, shining cities and quiet oceans, untouched by the chaos of the stars beyond. And yet, as beautiful as it was, Hale couldn't shake the weight in his chest, because the children standing behind him were not the same as the ones who had been taken. They were something far greater, but also something far more distant. The aliens had changed their bodies, reshaped their minds, and in doing so, they had taken their innocence, replaced it with understanding too vast for human hearts to hold. "You don't have to come with us," he told the eldest child, the silver-eyed girl named Lyra, whose presence felt like standing in sunlight, but she only smiled faintly and said, "We were born of Earth, Admiral, we belong where light began." Her words carried warmth, yet there was sorrow buried deep within them, sorrow too old for her young voice, and Hale knew then that the galaxy had created not just survivors, but witnesses, children who remembered every scream, every lab, every death. When the fleet entered Earth's orbit, the planet seemed to stop breathing. Every city, every home, every person looked up to the sky as the ships descended through the clouds like falling stars. The news spread faster than thought. "The children have returned?" People whispered in disbelief. Millions poured into the streets, tears streaming down faces as massive screens broadcast the moment the first ramp lowered and the children stepped onto Terran soil again, glowing softly like dawn breaking. After eternal night, the crowd fell silent. No cheers, no words, only the sound of wind moving through the city, and then one voice, an old woman's trembling whisper, "Welcome home," echoed through the speakers, and the silence broke into weeping. Hale stood behind them, his uniform dark against their light, his face unreadable, for he knew this was both a victory and a reckoning. The people saw miracles, but he saw the price that had been paid to bring them here. In the weeks that followed, Earth tried to understand what these children had become. Scientists ran endless tests. Theologians called them divine. Politicians called them hope, but none of those labels fit, because the children themselves seemed beyond it all. They moved with calm purpose, learning, listening, watching, as if they were measuring something the rest of humanity could not see. They spoke little, but when they did, their words were heavy with meaning. One night, as Hale met with the Planetary Council. Lyra appeared quietly at the doorway, her eyes reflecting the stars outside the window. "You've given us a home," she said softly. "But there is something you must understand. Home is not safety. Not anymore." The room fell silent. "They are rebuilding," she continued. "The ones who served the Council, the ones who called themselves the Dominion. They are gathering their fleets, searching for power in the ruins. They want what they lost. They want us." Hale rose slowly, his heart sinking. "You're certain?" Lyra nodded. "We can hear them, Admiral, across the void. In the space between suns, they whisper of vengeance. They want to finish what they began." Her voice never wavered, but the air around her seemed to hum with restrained energy. And for the first time since the array had fired, Hale felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear. Terran Command went into immediate mobilization. The shipyards reignited, defense lines reactivated. But this time it wasn't humanity that took the lead. It was the children. They guided the engineers, taught them to see patterns in energy that no machine had ever detected. They repaired broken systems with a mere touch, and within weeks, Earth's fleets were stronger than ever, powered by knowledge that seemed beyond human comprehension. But Hale watched them carefully, because with each passing day, the light within the children grew brighter, stronger, and colder. They began to dream of places no human had ever seen. Distant nebulae, lost civilizations, broken timelines, and when they spoke of them, their voices carried a strange tone, as if they were remembering rather than imagining. It became clear. They weren't just human children anymore. They were connected to something larger, something cosmic, a memory that stretched beyond creation itself. And though they loved Earth, they did not belong to it. One evening, Hale found Lyra standing on the balcony overlooking the ocean, the waves reflecting her light. "When you look out there," he asked, "what do you see?" She smiled faintly. "I see what was taken from us," she said. "But I also see what we've become, and that frightens me more than anything." Hale frowned. "Why?" And she looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold galaxies. "Because we have the power to give life, or to end it," she whispered. "And I don't know which one we'll choose when they come again." Her words lingered in the air, heavy and prophetic, and Hale realized that humanity's greatest fear was no longer the alien council or their armies. It was the possibility that their own children might one day judge them the same way they had judged their enemies. The next morning, reports arrived from the Outer Rim. Dominion fleets had begun massing again, their surviving generals promising revenge for the suns humanity had erased. But what terrified everyone most was that they were experimenting with fragments of human DNA, trying to recreate what the Council had done, trying to build their own ascendance. Hale summoned the High Command, his voice steady but sharp. "We can't let history repeat itself," he said. "This ends now." The room agreed, but before orders could be finalized, Lyra entered once again, her light flickering faintly. "You don't need to fight them," she said quietly. "We will go." Hale turned to her sharply. "You can't, it's too dangerous." But the children who had gathered behind her all shook their heads in unison, their voices calm. "We were made for this, Admiral. This is why we exist." Hale's chest tightened. He wanted to stop them, to protect them, but he knew deep down that they were right. They weren't soldiers. They were the answer to everything humanity had suffered, and now they would return that answer to the stars. That night, from the plains of New Geneva, millions watched as beams of golden light rose from the oceans, the forests, the cities, the children ascending silently toward the heavens. No ships, no engines, only radiance, and when they reached orbit, they turned toward the dark expanse where the Dominion fleets gathered, their voices echoing across every Terran frequency in perfect harmony. "We remember," they said, and then they vanished into the void. Hale stood alone in the command deck, the screens before him filled with the trails of fading light. His reflection staring back, older, emptier, but with a glimmer of pride hidden in the sorrow. He knew this wasn't the end, just another beginning, because humanity had given birth to something eternal, something that would carry their memory into the endless dark, and as he looked out at the stars, he whispered quietly, "Go bring the dawn." The words carried no command, only faith, and somewhere far beyond the edge of known space, the children of Earth moved like comets through the darkness, and wherever they passed, the stars flickered back to life, as if the universe itself was bowing in silence to the species that had once burned suns to bring its children home. The stars trembled as the children of Earth reached the edge of the known galaxy, their light scattering across the void like a sunrise piercing eternal night. The Dominion fleets waited there, thousands of warships aligned in formation, engines burning red, weapons charged, and at their center, the great flagship Terran Vox, a monstrous vessel the size of a moon, carrying the last remnants of the alien high command who once served the Council. Their leaders watched the approaching radiance through trembling claws, whispering in disbelief. They came without ships. They came as light, because the children of Earth did not fly in vessels. They moved through the fabric of space itself, their forms flickering between energy and flesh, glowing with the fire of creation. They didn't speak. They didn't threaten. They simply arrived, and the stars themselves seemed to dim in reverence. The Dominion commander, a scarred warlord named Kareth, rose from his throne, his voice shaking as he shouted to his crew, "Open fire!" 1,000 cannons answered, energy beams streaking across the void, tearing through the black. But before they could reach their targets, they slowed, twisted, and vanished, absorbed by invisible waves of gravity that shimmered around the children like halos. And then, in one breathtaking moment, the first child raised her hand, Lyra, and space bent outward in silence, not with fire or fury, but with a calm so complete it felt holy, and the Dominion fleet simply ceased to exist, erased from reality like ink wiped from glass. Admiral Hale watched the live feed from the Vigilant Dawn's distant observation relay, his heart heavy, his voice caught between awe and sorrow. "They didn't fight," he murmured. "They didn't destroy, they unmade." His officers stood silent, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. It wasn't war anymore. It was something beyond war, something divine and terrible. As the children spread their light across the void, the broken systems once consumed by darkness began to glow again, new stars, igniting where old ones had died. It was as if the universe itself was rewriting the scars of its past, giving birth to something new through the vengeance of humanity's lost children. But Lyra's voice echoed faintly through the comms, calm and distant. "We have done what we were made to do," she said. "But the balance is not ours to hold forever, Admiral. This light will fade unless humanity remembers why it was born." Hale gripped the edge of the console. "You're not coming back, are you?" he whispered, and for a long moment, there was only silence, until her reply came like the wind before dawn. "We will always be here, but not as you remember us. We are part of what you call heaven now. Not gods, not ghosts, just what comes after." The screens flickered, and suddenly the children were gone, their light dispersing into the stars until nothing remained but a soft, endless glow that stretched across the galaxy like a new Milky Way. A ribbon of light marking the path of the ascendants, the ones who had turned pain into creation. Hale stood motionless, the bridge around him silent except for the faint hum of the ship's systems, his officers waiting, but he said nothing. He could only watch as the last echoes of their light faded into the horizon of infinity, leaving behind a peace so deep it felt unreal. In the following years, no alien empire dared to rebuild their fleets. No war broke the silence of the stars, and no one touched a child born of Earth again. The legends spread like wildfire through every world, stories of radiant beings who erased suns and created new ones, the children of the dawn, the guardians of the lost, myths to some, truth to others, but to those who had seen it happen, the sight of stars rekindling in dead space was proof enough that humanity's vengeance had become the universe's balance. Admiral Hale lived to see that peace take hold, though he never stopped watching the skies. Each night he stood on the balcony of his home near the Terran coast, the ocean quiet beneath him, and he would look up to see that faint band of silver light stretching across the heavens, where his children had gone. Sometimes he would imagine hearing their voices carried on the wind, whispering words he could never quite understand, and it comforted him. Even as the years took their toll, the Terran fleet became guardians rather than conquerors, their ships now vessels of exploration, healing, and remembrance, and the Aegis Array, once a weapon of extinction, was dismantled, its pieces scattered into the sun. Because humanity no longer needed fear to protect itself, they had learned what it meant to lose everything and rebuild not out of hatred, but out of memory. And so, in the twilight of his life, Hale wrote his final message not as an admiral, but as a father of a civilization reborn. We were once children of Earth, fragile, flawed, angry, but when they took our young, they gave us purpose, and through pain, we became something eternal. We burned the stars to bring them home, and in doing so, we lit the path for all who come after. Remember them not as gods, but as us, the best of what we could be. He sealed the message and sent it into the black, a single probe carrying his words into the endless dark, and as it drifted beyond the reach of any sun, a flicker of light shimmered in its path, a familiar silver glow that danced like laughter. And in that instant, Hale smiled, for he knew the children had heard him. When his heart finally stopped, the night sky over Earth brightened for a moment, the stars themselves flaring in unison, as though saluting the man who had carried humanity's grief and turned it into a dawn that would never fade. Centuries passed, and the legend endured. Across worlds both human and alien, travelers still told the story of the species that avenged its children by erasing the sun of its enemies, yet in the end, gave light back to the stars. A story of wrath turned to grace, of loss turned to creation, and somewhere, beyond all maps and galaxies, where no signal could reach, a faint voice still whispered in the cosmic wind, "We remember." And in that whisper, every star seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself still carried the memory of the day humanity proved that even in the darkest night, they were always capable of becoming the dawn.